So with that, I'm just going to tell you a few brief things about the Science Gateways Community Institute. We're funded by the National Science Foundation to provide support to the community of gateway developers and creators and users. And we do that in three main areas. In our first area, we provide support for building and running gateways, and that includes hands-on development support with up to 25% of a FTE of a programmer to provide do actual coding for anywhere from 6 months to a year. We also have consultants who specialize in topics such as usability, cybersecurity, graphic design, and so forth that are available. And finally, we have a catalog of gateways and software where you can list your gateway, or if you have a software component such as Galaxy, for example, you can let people know that it exists and is maybe of interest either as a model or something to use, or as someone to connect with for other purposes. Our second area of support is in education and training, which of course includes this webinar series. We also have Gateway Focus Week, which is an intensive week of training and thinking about your gateway from a business planning perspective and sustainability perspective. Our student-focused programs, as I mentioned just a moment ago, provide all sorts of enrichment opportunities, including our Coding Institute and the summer internship program, and we're just in the process of launching an academic year internship program as well. And finally, we have lots of resources on our website, so I encourage you to be keep on visiting us to find our new things, because we're redesigning our website as we speak. And finally, in the area of networking community, we have our annual conference. I hope you all plan on thinking about submitting to that or attending that. We also have a community forum, which is a Google group that anyone is welcome to join, and it's a great way of posing questions and opportunities to other people who do the similar things to what you do. We have 2 ambassadors programs, both science ambassadors and gateway ambassadors. One is to advocate, the science ambassadors are to advocate for using a gateway among their disciplinary community, and the gateway program, gateway ambassadors are like campus-based ambassadors spreading the word or answering questions or connecting with others about gateways. Finally, we also have both an affiliates and a partner program, which have to do with related software or services that might be of interest to people in this community. We also encourage you, if you have news, to let us know. We'll happily spread the word. If you'd like to post on our blog as a guest poster, we welcome that and advertise jobs as well. So with that, I'll just ask you one little favor, which is at the end, if you could take a moment to go to our webinar evaluation, which is just 3 questions. 2 of them are multiple choice, and the last is just to get your input. We do actually listen to what you put in there, and it shapes the direction of what we offer in future webinars. So this is a great way for you to let us know if you enjoyed this, but also let us know what else you'd like to do. So with that, I will hand off the sharing to our presenter, Dave Clements, who is going to be talking today. I'm so excited because he has done a superb job in the Galaxy community with building that community, and he's going to talk about that. And I'm just going to let him take that away. Take it away, Dave. Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. First of all, is the screen visible, and can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I am still looking for my screen. Yes, I see your screen. Okay,
good. Okay. Let's see. So thanks for the intro. Oh, something happened. There we go. Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Catherine. Remind me at the end about the eval. So let's throw that up once we're done, too.
Yeah, I have a final slide, and it will also advertise our next webinar, which is also Galaxy related. So.
Bravo. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I won't talk about that. Nate's on the call. I'll talk about that. So he's giving next month. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to talk today about building and sustaining community efforts. And I am one of the community and training people for the Galaxy project. And I think we do a pretty good job because we have just this huge and really wonderful community that contributes to Galaxy's success. So this page lists, 3 items in the bullet list that show how active people are. But we could go on and on with how active people are in the community. The screenshot there is from the Hall of Fame from the Galaxy Training Network, a spectacular success we've had that I'll talk about in a bit. So let's talk about how we actually get there and how we hope to maintain this. And yeah, if you do have questions, type them in while we go, and I'll try to answer them as we go. So here's the rough agenda. I'm going to give you some background on Galaxy, some history, and then we'll talk about outreach support, building, sustaining, and community in a time of crisis. So what is Galaxy? If you're not familiar with it, this was our long-standing definition, and still is. So Galaxy is an open web-based platform for accessible, reproducible, and transparent biomedical analysis. So accessibility, reproducibility, and transparency are 3 of our core values. And this statement says it all, and yet it doesn't give you a full picture, or even anywhere close to a full picture of what we're about. So let's expand on that some. Galaxy is software, and we're also the gateways that use that software. So we have a bunch of well-known websites like usegalaxy.org or usegalaxy.eu, but there are hundreds of other websites that also use Galaxy. And we are the software plus the community of users, developers. It's a whole bunch of stuff, okay? So what is Galaxy? This is Keith Bradnam's definition, and I think this is how most people actually view Galaxy. It's a web-based platform that provides a simplified interface to many popular bioinformatics tools. So Galaxy protects biologists from the command line. That's one way to view us, and that's one reason why we are popular. To do bioinformatic analysis, you typically have to learn command line interfaces. You'll have to learn Linux system administration. You have to learn how to install things, all things which are not directly related to your biological questions. Galaxy allows you to get much closer to those biological questions much sooner than is typical with most bioinformatic tools. So, okay. But those definitions are missing a huge part of the picture. So James Taylor said this at last year's Galaxy Community Conference. The most important thing about Galaxy is this community, okay? So that has been a transition, and that's what this talk is about, is that transition from the emphasis on software to an emphasis on, yeah, the platform is important, but the community is equally or more important. And the community is certainly important to our success. So, okay. And now it's time for a sorrowful detour. So if you have not heard, James Taylor, who's one of our project PIs, has been my boss for 9 years, and one of the founders, the person who said this, he passed away 6 weeks ago, suddenly. One day he was online tweeting about access to data, and the next day he was gone. So this slide, which I wrote exactly as it is for a talk in February, now has new meaning. We are missing a huge part of the picture, and that's James, who's one of the founders. But, well, a couple things. First of all, I found out a lot about James in the past month, past 6 weeks, that I didn't know before, even though I've worked with him for more than 9 years. The first thing is that one of the reasons Galaxy has a strong emphasis is because James has a strong emphasis on community, is that James thought this was important to our success. And so from the very beginning, we're 15 years old, from the very beginning, we were much more aware than most groups are about the importance of the community. And so I'm speaking to you, I've had this job directly because of James's influence on Galaxy. Let's see, one of the, so one of the things I've learned about James in the past month is he was involved in a lot of stuff, some of which I knew about, some of which I did not. We have this huge online community. we created a page about James when he passed, and it has a lot of stuff on it, but it ends with this section. This is all reaction and tributes from the community. And this is how I found out that our community emphasis originated with James 15 years ago. This is a small sample of what was posted, but it's 10 screens as of yesterday, and there's more I need to do to update this. James was also a steering committee member for the Scientific Gateways Community Institute. He was involved in lots of things. He ran meetings at Cold Spring Harbor. He was a mentor to lots of people. So one last slide on James before we let's get back to outreach. We have created a foundation in his honor to continue his work. And the foundation is going to help junior faculty and students and grad students in their careers, and hopefully connect them with mentors. So, and get them to meetings where they can meet people and build their networks. So, okay, so it's been a grim 2 months for everybody. Yeah, we quite miss James. We can't replace him, but we are a large, robust project. So we're going to miss him, but we've got plans in order. For instance, I now work for Mike Schatz, who's also well known in bioinformatics, is also at Johns Hopkins. So it's been bumpy, but I think things are smooth more or less from here on out. So we'll see how things go, but I'm pretty optimistic, actually. Okay, no questions. Okay. Everybody take a deep breath, okay? Some history on the project. So we started in 2005 at Penn State. We were originally funded by NSF. Since 2011, we've been primarily funded by NHGRI. Oops, where am I? Okay. Okay, sorry. So some history. We have lots of things we keep track of to see how we're doing, to see what's going on. These two statistics are indicative of what's going on. Sorry. And they are tracking publications over time and platforms over time. So we track pubs that use Galaxy, that reference Galaxy, that extend it, that deploy it, that do, that talk about Galaxy in any way. And we expect in 2020 that we'll exceed 2,000 publications per year, which is a lot of publications. We expect this month we may hit 10,000 total publications. So in terms of usage, we're very widely used, we're very widely known, we're very widely referenced. In terms of availability, that's what the second graph is about. We track the number of publicly accessible Galaxy platforms. So Galaxy is software, it's open source, anybody can install it and set it up in their shop. And a lot of people do this. Most instances are behind firewalls. They're universities, hospitals, research institutions, but some of them are public and we track those. And so right now we have a little over 125 public servers where anybody can go in, log in, and run analyses. We recently started tracking containers, so Docker containers, academic clouds, and commercial clouds that support Galaxy. So the clouds are places where you can go and launch your own Galaxy instance, usually pretty rapidly. For the academic clouds, you'll have to apply for an account or an allocation. But once you get those, you can launch. And commercial clouds are things like AWS and Google that have ready-made Galaxy instances on them that anybody can launch once you create an account. So we now have something like 160, 170 platforms where people can run Galaxy either right now or very soon. Okay. So outreach, we have a couple of guiding principles for outreach, and I'm gonna go over the four of them. The first thing is, as an outreach person, you have to recognize and value your community. You have to value them. You actually have to believe and communicate back to them that you value their contributions and what they're doing. You have to recognize that. They have to know that someone on the inside, we'll talk about that in a bit, actually cares about what they're doing, knows what they're doing. okay? Second thing related to that is you need to promote their contributions back to the larger community. So it's good that you know, but you also want them, so you also want the rest of your community to know that there's a lot going on, and it's not just the core team that's doing it, it's everybody. So you really need to put effort into promoting your community and their contributions. Third thing you need to do is provide opportunities for people to contribute and connect with each other. So you need to be a welcoming environment. You need to make it easy for people to contribute. You need to have it be as clear as you can that it's a friendly environment, that you're not going to get smacked if you suggest something that somebody already suggested, for instance. You really need to provide those opportunities. The fourth thing, and for us this has been huge, you need to recognize that contributions are not just code. So we're a gateway, just like most people on this call. We're software, we know that, and software matters a lot. But so does everything else. People put on events, they put on training, they do work in Galaxy, and then they present posters about it. They create tutorials. They ask questions, they answer questions on forums, they write doc, they submit bug reports. All these things are contributions, and there is huge value in recognizing all of them. Your community is not just about people who expand the software in your platform. It's about people who expand your ecosystem and make it better. And this is easy to lose track of when you're in a software project. Okay, some details on how we actually implement those four things. This is the Galaxy Community Hub. This is what it looked like before James passed 2 months ago. It'll go back to looking like this in a month or two. So you got to let your community know how vital they are. So this is the hub above the fold. Highlight the word community. It occurs 4 times right off. Okay. It's not just a word for us. It is a core value that the community is what drives the project. We try to communicate that. We're also trying to communicate that contribution from the community is what drives the project. And so on this particular screen snapshot, we've got community curated contributors contributing to events, open chat, so all sorts of ways to contribute right on the project homepage, and emphasized on the project homepage. Recognize and promote what your community is doing. So our homepage is usually a carousel of slides. On the day I took this shot, there were 3 of the 5 slides were about community contributions. Okay. Furthermore, all of the news, all of the events, and all of the tweets on that day were also about community contributions. So really put a lot of effort into recognizing what your community is doing. So, okay. Another key to the success of your gateway, in my opinion, is you got to get in front of people. There is a ton of great software out there. And sadly, having great software, great portals, it's not enough. People have to know you exist as well. And so it's necessary to have good stuff, good software, good portals. It's not sufficient. And so you really have to actively work at getting the word out. And so we do that in a couple ways. We try to get on Galaxy in as many places as we can. So in 2019, we presented at PAG, Genome Informatics, and so on down the line. Now these might be posters, they might be full-blown workshops. GCC is a full-blown Galaxy conference, okay? You also need to encourage and enable your community to present your gateway. So, okay, I want to revisit this slide because those first 2 bullet items on this slide are from the previous slide. That top statement is true. In 2019, we did present at those 13 meetings, but it's also absolutely wrong. And that's because of the second statement. We do encourage and enable our community, and that has a huge impact on how visible Galaxy is and how many people get to learn about it. So because of what our community did, that top statement should instead read, in 2019, the Galaxy community presented Galaxy at 47 meetings, not 13, participated in 10 hackathon collaboration fests, ran 81 training workshops events, and hosted 67 Galaxy-centric events. Okay, so those 13 meetings at the top, that's the funded US team that did that. The bottom is the community. And the bottom is what you want to communicate. The top emphasizes an us and them. And my point is there should not be an us and them. I'll revisit this point as we go. But you take a look at that bottom statement and it is much more powerful than the top statement, okay? And it's much more true than the top statement. It communicates everything you want to communicate, whereas that top statement is actually divisive, okay? So really emphasize what your community does, really enable what your community does. Okay. So we
Can I
talked
ask you a
about
question, Dave?
Yes.
I'm wondering, how do you know how many people are doing all these things in the 47 odd stuff?
Right. So we do all sorts of things. So on Twitter, people, they announce things. We have hashtags and we have our account name. There are places where they can announce things. So Use Galaxy EU has a news feed. usegalaxy.org.au has a news feed. People contact me and let me know. People advertise on mailing lists. So I basically look at all those things. I'm subscribed to 8 billion mailing lists, and if the word Galaxy occurs in a post, I'm going to look at that at least one time during the week, because we have searches set up for that. We also have Google searches set up. It's work. In theory, your community tells you, and I do get some of that, okay? But in actuality, the community's not going to tell you. They're just going to announce stuff. And it turns out we're pretty good at picking up things when they're announced. So yeah, that's not going to get any better. The community's not going to start telling me everything. Okay, so this
it sounds like it's a lot of work. In other words,
it can be, but
Yeah.
it's very rewarding for me, because I then retweet that. I then put that on the events calendar. I put that in the newsletters. We're going to talk about all these things. And so we help the community be a success, and the community helps the project be a success. So it's a vicious circle of virtue. It's a virtuous circle. I don't know.
Yes, sounds like a virtuous circle cycle.
One thing that's not in the slides that now is a good time to talk about: don't name your project with a common word. Make up a word. So you cannot search the web for Galaxy. That does not work. You can't search Twitter for Galaxy. Okay, we are a small percentage of everything that uses the word Galaxy. You want to name your project something unique. Okay, JBrowse, for instance, is a genome browser. That's a great name because it's used by 2 things in the world, and the other one is not that popular. Okay, you want to name your project something very distinct. Galaxy is a great name. People know what it is, but my life is really hard at times because of that. Okay, so. Okay, thanks for the question. And yeah, please ask questions, people, as we go. Okay, so training. Training is entwined with Galaxy Outreach. It's really key to getting your gateway used. No matter how intuitive your interface, you've got to have tutorials or, like interactive tours where people can walk through and see how to use your website. It is not as obvious as you think. So we did our first user training in 2009, our first admin training, so for people deploying Galaxy in 2010. So I've been doing training for a while. This is a great time to talk about one of our really, I think, huge community success stories. So the Galaxy Training Network, I, in theory, coordinate training, although it's now community driven, so I'm not sure I coordinate it at all anymore. But in 2014, I started the Galaxy Training Network. And it was initially a directory of trainers, okay, and also a collection of training materials that people could contribute. And the directory of trainers was a huge success. It means I don't have to fly to South Africa anymore, although I really like flying to South Africa. I don't have to do it anymore because there are trainers in South Africa, and people, it's now easy to find them, okay? And that part was huge, but the sharing training materials was not a success because in the old model, people would write training for their target audience and for whatever workshop they were doing. And they would get that workshop to work. They would create training data sets. They would use, whatever infrastructure they used But in their brain, it was not about creating a generically useful training instance. It was about doing this workshop, and then afterward, they would share the slides. And the slides were really useful, but you couldn't take the workshop as a whole and port it to a different environment. It was really hard because they would have custom tools that no one else had. Some of the data sets, they had to get special permission and they weren't generally available. So that part was not a success. So in 2016, the community came up with a new a new model for the training network. And what we've moved to since then is training materials are now in GitHub and they are community maintained. And there's this huge infrastructure for helping you create them in such a way that they are easy to reuse. And so now when people write tools and they want to get them used, they create a Galaxy Training Network tutorial about them. When there's new domains out there, like ATAC-seq, for instance, people can create a tutorial which is widely useful. It means anybody in the world can come along, any trainer can come along, and in fact, any person can come along and walk through those tutorials, learn the concepts, and do the exercises. And it works for everybody because when people write these, they have a global audience in mind. The data sets are all published in Zenodo. It's been just a huge success. So the new GTN has infinitely more impact than the original. And the key point here is this group, the community, did something that I didn't have the vision to do. I certainly didn't have the time, but they took it on, they made it happen. They made it the huge success that it now is, that it wasn't going to be with my model. And this transformation was possible because we had already established a culture where they knew they could try this. And they knew we would welcome it with open arms. So it empowered them to propose it and make it happen. And in theory, I'm still the nominal head, but in no way am I running this effort. Okay, I'm the pretty face, which is kind of scary. I'm the pretty face of the Galaxy Training Network, but I don't run the show, and everybody knows that. I'm trying to convince them that I should no longer be the pretty face. So, okay. So if you empower your community, sometimes you get really huge payoffs in ways you never saw coming. And I think the GTN is a great example of that. Okay. Communication, key part of outreach and community building. You want to make it easy for people to get big news and or all news about your project. So let's talk about big news. Our first step in this direction was our release process. So this was the first bit of feedback we got from the community at our first meeting, is we needed clear processes for release. And so we settled eventually on 3 releases per year, and they're very well documented. They come with separate release notes for admins, people deploying Galaxy, and for users, people using Galaxy. This is run by the committers, the Galaxy committers group, which is community driven. We started that process, I think, in 2015, and now that group is community driven. There are members of the funded US team on it, but that is, you know, the community puts in what features it wants to. There's a process for testing. It's a rock solid way to do things now, and originally it was not. So that was our first step. Something else you want to do, well, something else I really recommend doing is creating a low volume channel for announcements only. So for us, that's a mailing list. And we created this 8 years ago. At that time, we already had 2 lists, but they were support lists and they were high volume. And if you think about it, if people just want announcements and they're on the Galaxy user lists, and 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100 emails is news, they're going to unsubscribe and you're going to lose them. If you create a low volume moderated list, which only has news, it gets 1 or 2 emails a month, you are much less likely to lose people. And so the Galaxy Announced membership is now over 11,000 people. We're also on Twitter, we'll talk about that, but you really want to have some way to communicate news, important stuff that's outside of your support channels. So on the other end of the spectrum, if you want all news, we have Twitter. And on Twitter, we announce anything of possible interest to the community. It's pretty active. Some best practices for Twitter that we recommend: you want a mixture of original content and retweets. Retweets are vital because, again, they're another way to show that your community is active and that you recognize what the community is doing. You value what they're doing. For tweets that you originate, you want to attach an image whenever possible. Because they get much more engagement. We choose to follow anyone who's saying things that are relevant to the community, even if they're negative. Okay, we still follow them because we want to hear what they're saying. We use TweetDeck to schedule tweets. I recommend TweetDeck. It's better than the web interface for most things in Twitter, not everything. But if you haven't looked at it, take a look at it. It makes my life much easier. And multiple people can send tweets. So not just people on the funded US teams. We have people in Europe, we have people in Australia that also tweet from this account. So we have almost 24-hour coverage. Okay. The newsletter. So this contains big and medium news. I'm not sure that newsletters are a good match for all communities, but I encourage you to think about it for yours. We send these out monthly, at least in theory. I just had a long stretch where we didn't get one out, but hopefully monthly in the future. And it contains big and medium news. So we advertise this on every outreach channel we have. It's a great way to highlight stuff your community's doing, and that's what we do with it. This is an example screenshot from that, and there we are, the Scientific Gateways Community Institute. And it also tells you about 25 other upcoming events, most of them virtual. And blog activity, all of which is written by the larger community. So it is a lot of work to prepare this. I'm not sure if the amount of readership actually justifies the effort. So we do get engagement. We get a couple hundred views of this every time it comes out. I'm not sure if that justifies the amount of time I put into it. What I am sure is the process of creating this newsletter is worth the time because it forces me at least once a month to find out what the community is doing. And I have a whole bunch of places I check, a whole bunch of channels I check, and I have really become aware, and thus the larger community becomes aware of all sorts of things that are going on that I wouldn't if I didn't have to do this once a month. So again, newsletters, not sure they're a good match for every community, but I recommend at least the process of checking once a month, once a week, something like that, for what your community is doing. So, okay. Support is another vital area of community building. If people perceive your gateway is not being supported, or that their questions are not answered or valued, or their suggestions are not answered or valued, it's a bad thing. So we've emphasized support from the very beginning, had a user support mailing list after the first year. We added a dev list, and we hired a dedicated support person, Jen Hillman-Jackson, in 2010, and she still runs support for the Galaxy project. Over the years, we have moved from platform to platform. So we started out with a mailing list for user support, and then we went to Biostar. We're now on Discourse. We started out with IRC for chat, and we're now on Getter, which is more welcoming and friendly. So support channels have become more engaging and welcoming over the years. And something that's key to support. So Galaxy has, 10,000, 100,000 users every month. I don't know. It's a huge number. And Jen is great, but there's no way she can support 10,000 people every month. And so we have always tried to communicate the expectation of community support. And this works better in some forums than others. If you go to the Getter channel, for instance, on any given day, you'll see at least 10 people answering questions. And we really try to communicate that, hey, we value community contribution and we really want your help here. And you have to keep saying that to people, because if not, then they'll just stop responding as much. So been very successful in Getter, less successful on Help, but still successful with getting the community to help. And there is no way we could do this without community support. Again, Jen's great, but 10,000 people, 100,000 people a month, there's just no way that it's going to scale without community support. So, okay. No questions. Okay. Building and sustaining community. So all of the stuff we talked about, all these online spaces and interactions, they're opportunities to contribute and connect. Everything I'm talking about today, all these mechanisms, all these means, they help build your community. So they're justified as an end unto themselves, but they also have the net effect of making your community stronger. Okay. One thing which is, well, which has not been online in the past, usually, sometimes they have, is Galaxy events. You got to get your community together. Well, I don't know if you got it, but it really helps. And provide them with opportunities to share their accomplishments, their challenges, and to collaborate. And so let's talk about a couple ways we've done this in the past and we hope to do in the future. Hackathons / collaboration fests. We're big on these. They really are an excellent way to grow your contributor community. We don't use the term hackathon anymore. It has implications that do not reflect what we are about. So we call them collaboration fests now, and I actually like that name much better. It really emphasizes collaboration, and they're festivals. They really are. So we really make it clear that our goal is not to produce code during the event. Okay, we're not opposed to that, but that's not our goal. And it's easy to have that be your goal with software-based projects, but that's not what we're about. What our collaboration fests are about is growing the community of future contributors. So our co-fests are about bringing people into the contributor community, showing them how things are done, getting them to know the people who are well established. So they know when they suggest something, they're not going to get shot down. So they have someone to ask questions to, like, hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? Our events are very much about people, not about artifacts, okay? Furthermore, they're not just about code, they're about all of those types of contributions we talked about earlier. So we've had a ton of success with training materials at our collaboration fests. You don't have to be a coder to come to a Galaxy Code Fest and be productive. A lot of stuff has come out, and we've welcomed a lot of people to those communities. So they're also about establishing and strengthening those connections. So again, not about producing code. The main emphasis is about people, bringing new people in. So something else we do, we have sub-communities and regional events. So all of these communities listed in the first line were started by people from those communities and all are supported by Galaxy Outreach. Galaxy Europe and Galaxy Australia are two particular successes. They are both huge and they both have large Galaxy servers that they make publicly available. This year we hope to launch 3 communities in Asia, and those efforts are going well. And several of these communities also have Twitter accounts that are run by the communities as well as by me. So I have tweet access on those. Most of these communities have had regional Galaxy events, and the US team supports them by promoting them and also by sending people. So we are really big on this.
Dave, there's a question from Ishwar. Do you manage sub-communities in Gitter or through some other channel?
Some of them have Gitter channels. So let's see, the European community has a Gitter channel. The Galaxy Training Network has a Gitter channel. And some of them have Twitter accounts. And so there's conversation on Twitter, but some of them have mailing lists. We're moving away from mailing lists. So I would say Gitter is our primary means for that. But some of them still use mailing lists. Does that help, Ishwar? And thank you for the question. I feel like I'm talking into the void. So
Not into too much of a void. I'm listening.
Okay.
He said yes, thanks.
Thank you, Ishwar. That's great. And thanks for interrupting, Catherine. I keep looking over there and seeing nothing. So.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay. Good. Okay, so events. The Galaxy Community Conference is our flagship event. We've had it every year for 10 years. We've had over 200 participants for most of that time. And the goal of this is to make and strengthen connections, okay, that are harder to make and maintain over distances. So, you know, you get people in the same room, they talk about their work. We have a collaboration fest at this event. We do training at this event. But yeah, the goal is really to you know, strengthen that community. And we do, I think, very well at that. Okay, so this was our plan for this year. We were going to meet in Toronto. We were really excited, okay? Toronto is such a cool city. We were in such a cool venue. And we were also co-located with BOSC, the Bioinformatics Open Source Conference. It's the second time we've done that. So the first time we did that, we had 300 people, and you get all sorts of cross connections and cross collaborations. It was an exciting time, okay? But then COVID struck. And I don't know, 2 weeks ago, we all went home from our office and we all were trying to figure out what to do. And we made the decision fairly early, I think still in March, that we were going to be online. And okay, that decision was painful to make, although, you know, we obviously had to make it. And it, you know, it was painful because the in-person stuff, you know, the connections you build are just really spectacular. And as organizers, we get a lot out of that. We put a lot of effort into building those connections. And that was going to be much harder online. But we adapted, we moved online. And the point I want to make here is that by moving online, we actually had opportunities that we didn't have before. So having a meeting in Toronto is great because it's this great place and the venue is great and it would be really conducive to connections, but it wasn't going to happen. But having the event in Toronto is also expensive. Now we're an affordable conference. We really work at that, but still, you have to pay registration. You have to fly to Toronto. You have to pay for your lodging. And we work hard at finding affordable lodging, but still it's not accessible for everyone, okay? So that was one thing. Let's see, by moving online, our costs just plummeted. And that meant our registration costs plummeted. So we reconfigured our registration. We've always had 3 tiers, but we rearranged them. Now our most affordable tier is for researchers, students, and nonprofits from low and lower middle income countries. You can go to a 3-day meeting for $12. And our hope is that you know, that is really going to make it possible for large parts of the world that couldn't afford to fly to Toronto before. It's now going to cost them $12. And so we're hoping to reach new audiences by making that much more affordable. The second opportunity we saw was we're online. And so that means we can do things maybe a little different. And so we decided we're going to mirror events. We're going to hold the BCC events twice each day. So once is going to start on the regular Toronto time. We're going to run for 5 or 6 hours. And then 12 hours after it starts in Toronto, we're going to start again in the Eastern Hemisphere, okay? The Eastern Hemisphere is going to be run by the Galaxy Australia group. So we have a group over there that's coordinating everything on that side. The training is going to be live on both sides. It's going to be different content, although sometimes the same, sometimes different. But training is going to be live on both sides of the world. The meeting is going to be a mixture of recorded and live on both sides of the world. And then the CoFest is going to be live on both sides of the world. So by going virtual, we have made BCC be close to a time zone near you, no matter where you are. And by being affordable, we hope those 2 things in combination have made this very accessible, the most accessible event we've ever had. So as an event organizer, it was pretty grim in the early days of COVID because I was canceling everything and I was moving stuff online, which can be less of a rewarding experience. But when we came across these opportunities, it was a real boost for my event organizer side of my personality because I feel great about this stuff. It's like we're actually making things more accessible. And the experience will be different, but it's actually going to be global, possibly certainly in ways it never has been. So we're really excited about that. So if you're planning events and you have a potentially global community, I really encourage you to think about stuff like this, okay? Something else that happened in this particular crisis is Galaxy is about biomedical research. We are a community that can do something potentially about COVID. And what I can do as an outreach person is recognize all those things and promote all those things. And so this is a screenshot from the May newsletter that talks about what's going on in the world. And there are some coordinated efforts from the Use Galaxy Star servers, the ones in Europe, Australia, and the US. There's also work from the communities. So in the UK effort is using something called MRC Climb, which is a cloud-based effort that uses Galaxy. And so Galaxy is being used in earnest in the UK to fight COVID. In Italy, the group that provides Galaxy to Italian researchers on their research cloud, they have created a COVID-specific instance of Galaxy that people can bring up, and they've opened it up to people outside of Italy. So really amazing stuff is going on. We've had 2 tutorials created already about COVID. It's just great stuff, and we really try to acknowledge that in every channel we have. So the last thing I want to talk about in a time of crisis is coping. And I almost didn't put this slide in. I thought about it. And the reason I thought about not putting it in is because we're not a social support network. I mean, we are, but that's not our, we're a scientific community is what we are, okay? But in this time of COVID, the fact that we are a tight and supportive community, I think has helped everyone in that community, because when everybody had to go home from their office and work on their own from home 2 months ago, the Galaxy community was already pretty well connected on Gitter, Twitter, and Galaxy Help. And it's my belief that if you were part of the Galaxy community, the existence of these things and the fact that we'd already established them as welcoming and friendly meant that you were less isolated. And so we have a fair amount of non-work chatter that happens on Gitter and Twitter. And I think that's really helps people feel less isolated. And so I work from home all the time. This was not a switch for me. And I can tell you from personal experience that having these channels has been really helpful to me over time to not feel isolated. And I think that's helped the larger community. So this is my last slide. And I think it sums up nicely what's happened with Galaxy. So we used to be the Galaxy team, and I still use that term. I'm fighting it in my brain. And what that meant was the people on the US teams that are funded by the core NIH grant. Okay, and there used to be the Galaxy community, and they were 2 separate things. But for several years, you know, since we opened up committers in 2015 and we opened the Intergalactic Utility Commission in 2013, the Galaxy Training Network started in 2016. We have moved from an us and them. It was never us versus them, okay? It was us and them. We have moved to an us model. And so the term Galaxy team, that is now synonymous with Galaxy community. And that's been true for several years. And I think that transition is going to be key to our success moving forward. So yeah, I think that terminology really sums it up nicely. So I'd like to thank everyone. I don't know how much time I took. First, I'd like to thank the Galaxy community, literally thousands of people who've contributed tools, doc support, you name it, over the past 15 years. I'd like to thank Catherine and Nighty for having me, for inviting me. I'd like to thank SGCI for making Galaxy a part of that project. And NIH, I'm an NIH, GRI, and NSF for funding it. We also get funding from other places, but those are our main funders. And you guys for being on this call. Okay, any questions?
Not just yet at the moment, but that doesn't mean they won't show up any minute now. I was curious in listening to your discussion of going virtual. Given that you have this international community, and I noticed in your post about the conference, and prices start at $12 per person for the 3 days. How did you decide how to price it so it was affordable across the way, but yet you know, it wasn't sort of, I mean, is it a nominal fee so that psychologically it is just getting people to, you know,
No,
think that they paid something, you know?
no. We thought about doing that for the Co-Fest because we often have people sign up for it and then don't show up because it's free
Mhm.
every year.
Mhm.
No, so we do have expenses. The expenses you'll have with an online event are the platform. So we haven't selected a platform yet, but Zoom is the default.
Mhm.
And we can get enough throughput on Zoom for $1,000. So, okay, at minimum, we can use Zoom. It's viable. It has everything we need. We haven't settled on that yet, but if we do that, it'll cost us $1,000.
Mhm.
So we have to recoup that. We also need to recoup costs from the websites. So we have a sked.com website for the schedule,
Mhm.
and we need to recoup our costs from EasyChair. And so we do have costs, and our goal is to recoup them. Our goal is not to lose money, but this is also not seen as a revenue opportunity for us. Some conferences like ISMB are huge, and it's the conference that actually funds the society. So we don't have that situation. I'm paid. I have a day job. I don't need to generate my own funding as an outreach person. That's also true for BOSC. They all have day jobs. So we don't need to charge extra to keep the society going because there is no society. Well, there's OBF as a society, but they're self-funded. So we do have costs, but yeah, we're trying to accurately reflect our actual costs. So, and Linda has a question. How are students involved in your Galaxy project? And so does Mona. Okay. Mona, I don't know who asked first. I'm going to take Mona's. I'm curious if you have some stats about Galaxy community and range, men, women. We do. So we track stats on well, I'll upload the slides. Bit.ly GXY stats will take you to the stats page. That page does not directly answer your question though about, how many are students, how many are women, how many, from what nationality. We have those stats for the conference. And I can tell you that for the last 2 years at the conference, we've had 30% women. And I know that because we started actively trying to address that imbalance a couple of years ago. And we started out at like 18%. So, okay, we've come, from 18 to 30, that's great. It's necessary, it's not sufficient. So we're still working on that. We plateaued in the last 2 years. So that's unfortunate, but we're still working on that. In terms of students, we really encourage student participation. So through a couple ways. One is we offer fellowships to come to events to participate. And so last year we had 19 applications, I think, to attend, the big conference. And those favor students and early career researchers. They also favor people from developing countries, and they also favor people from underrepresented groups, historically underrepresented groups. And so last year, I think we had 9 people we awarded fellowships to. We would have liked to have done more, but we didn't have the funds. So we do that as well. We also have pretty cheap registration rates. Before this year, for instance, if you were a student and you registered early, you could go to a 3-day event for less than $100. Okay, maybe a lot less, maybe like 60, going from memory there. We are global. At the conferences, I track this because sponsors want to know, potential sponsors want to know. We tend to have most people from the continent that it's on. So we've moved back and forth from North America to Europe every year. We're looking at Australia for the future, looking at Asia for the future, looking at Africa for the future. We'll see if that happens. But most people are from the continent we're on. But we do get every year, not every year, we've had some years, but we have people from all 6 continents most years. Some years we don't have South America represented, okay? Hope that answers your question, Mona. I do have more stats, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. And Linda, how are students involved? Oh, that was Linda's question, sorry. Okay. Mona, have I answered your question? And Linda, have I answered your question? Or do you have follow-ups?
And you guys can write it in the question. Yeah, Mona says yes.
Okay, thank you for asking,
Um,
Mona. I have a theory that outreach people are insecure and they hate talking to the void. So thank you for asking.
It is weird talking to nobody, huh?
Yes, it
yeah,
is.
well, we have just 1 minute left to go. So I will repeat just before thanking you, Dave, I just want to repeat that we would love to get your feedback about this webinar. I found it immensely useful, and the link is both in chat as well as here if you just want to type it on this on the screen. And also I want to make sure that you all know that if you'd like to know about the guts essentially of the Galaxy project, next month is focused on the project itself as a platform. So I hope I'm pronouncing this right, but Nick Koraor, am I saying that right? I hope, from Penn State is going to be talking about that as part of our Gateway close, okay. I'll have to learn it by next week. I mean, next month. So we've been having a Gateway Platform series, and this is number 4. So I encourage you all to consider attending that and learning about that platform that everyone is so passionate about in this community. So also, on the subject of students, we do just want to make sure you know that this is where to find information about our student programs, and that we'll have this on our webinar archive. We're at the end of the hour, and I see that Linda asked a follow-up question about interns. And maybe since you know how to reach, I can make sure you know how to reach Linda. You can follow up with her directly. I'll make sure to connect the two of you. But Dave, I really want to thank you for this. I learned a lot, and I think that it really speaks a lot to the kinds of thoughtfulness that needs to go into making a community grow. And I wish that I had kicked off the hour by mentioning the fact that our very first meeting as a group for the SGCI was a kickoff event in Indiana, and it was held there because the Galaxy Conference was there that year in 2016, and we got to come along to one of your dinners, and I have to say I was floored by how many people were there, and I didn't know much about Galaxy at the time, so I was like, who are all these people and why are they all here? And gosh, they're so excited to be here. So it really, even in 2016, 4 years ago, really spoke to the quality of the community already. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all next month. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, everyone.